take a step back sometimes and be like, holy shit, I wrote a thing that convinced people to take out millions of dollars out of their pockets and give it to me. Like, that's kind of nuts.
One time I went to a Genius Network meeting,
Yeah.
and I met Paris for the first time.
Oh,
there.
yeah. Love that guy. Yeah.
Amazing guy. Love that guy.
Yeah.
And he did a talk on schemas, and he suggests a book about schema too, how to reinvent your life or something like that. And that book, it has like a score system, like a quiz that you can do to find out basically how fucked up you are. So I scored pretty high on that scale. And then the next morning I went to him and I said, hey, I just did this thing and I scored this much and looks like I'm pretty, fucked up. And he's like, yeah, most copywriters I know, they're all fucked up.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We're all fucked. I mean, how could you be? Kevin Rogers, good friend of mine, great copywriter. One of my favorite things he's ever said, because he used to be a stand-up comic for years. And he said, going out to dinner with stand-up comics and going out to copywriters is the exact same thing, except for with copywriters, it's a much nicer restaurant, right? And it's true. And like, if you know anything about stand-up comics or funny people in general, like I'm a pretty funny guy. It's because I'm fucking traumatized. Like, plain and simple, right? Like, I had some sexual abuse when I was a kid. My dad died when I was young. I got the bipolar thing. I got the Lyme disease thing, etc. Eventually, you're either funny or you kill yourself. You gotta pick one. But I think copywriters are a similar thing. We were all kind of, what draws you to this career, I think, is you got to be kind of fucked up to want to do it in the first place. It's torturous. It's hard.
Yeah. For me, what draws me into copywriting, and still my favorite thing to do, like out of managing my whole business, that's the one thing that I continue to refuse to let go, to write copy, to do ads, to things like that. It's the, I don't know, it's the satisfying feeling of knowing that the words you put on paper or in some kind of format media made someone take some kind of action.
It's a weird thing to even think about. It's so easy to think it's a video game, right? It's so easy to like write your copy and you put it up and it goes out and you look at the stats and then you're like, you don't really think about the fact that it's actual people who are buying your thing, who are like going through that funnel, who are bonding with Michael Fiore in that case or whatever else. So it can be strange. I try to take a step back sometimes and be like, holy shit, I wrote a thing that convinced people to take out millions of dollars out of their pockets and give it to me. Like, that's kind of nuts. And it happened while I was asleep. Magic? It's crazy. It is like writing a magic. It's like a magic spell. Sometimes it's about and it's such an interesting psychological journey to figure out how to sell things. And I do think, with going back to the AI thing, it's like, sometimes I feel like AI will never truly understand human beings. And then I'm like, well, does it really need to, or can it just fake it really well? Right? Like, will it get to the point that it can just fake it really well by digesting enough data that it at least seems like, they talk about the issue of consciousness with AI, right? And is consciousness an emergent property, or is it something that's been a particular part of the brain or whatever? But they say, like, hey, eventually we're going to have AI that are indistinguishable from human beings as far as personality goes, conversations you can have with them, agency, etc. Right? And it will be impossible for us to ever tell, hey, does that AI there, is it alive? Does it have a mind? Does it know it exists or not? Because it certainly acts like it does and it presents like it does, but it's going to be, it's crazy shit. It's the most crazy existential shit possible to even think about. I love this shit though. I love the idea of thinking about consciousness. With my mental health stuff, I talked about this before with something else, but like, I had a couple of weeks where I was convinced I didn't exist. Fascinating experience. Very freeing, weirdly enough. It's extremely freeing when you think you don't exist. You're just like, cool, man. There's nothing's wrong.
Wait, but did you start like jumping out of windows or something?
Not at all. It was a weird dichotomy between like, man. You know what it was? It's like I knew he existed physically. There was a Chris Haddad being, but as far as like internally, I was like, oh, there is no me, if that makes any sense.
So you de-identified with
I guess so. It was a detachment kind of thing, a disassociation kind of thing, something like that. I've talked to people about that before, but it's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting.
I think that's healthy just sometimes to do it.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
People kind of sink into their identities to a point where sometimes they should step out. You know.
Well, I think people need to learn. I've been thinking about this a lot with self-awareness. I think I've become a pretty self-aware person over the years, having gone through all this kind of stuff. But I think that most people are not very self-aware and don't want to be, right? Like the best example I have being confirmation bias. Like you were saying before that I think it was your dad, like you can show him any evidence in the world that Putin is a monster and whatever else, and he'll be like, no, actually, this proves the opposite, right? Like this proves whatever. Well, you or I can see something and be like, hey, my brain is telling me that even that actually proves the thing that I wanted to prove, right? And then you or I can take a step back and go, yeah, but is that true, or is that just my confirmation bias triggering that? Let me take a step back and try to figure out what's actually true, because we have the self-awareness and we're willing to do that. I don't think your dad would never even consider that he has confirmation bias, right?
No, he wouldn't.
If you talk to him and said, oh, it's this thing called confirmation bias, blah, 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 he probably wouldn't even believe you. He'd be like, well, that's bullshit. No, look, that is evidence right there. That is hardcore evidence that Putin is right and Ukraine is full of monsters. And like, look, why can't you see it? It's right fucking there, right? Like, that's the biggest problem, I think, is most people are not, I've said this a lot, we're not rational. We're just not rational creatures. We are not designed, quote unquote, to be rational. We are not evolved to be rational. We are evolved to propagate and take over the planet. And the fact that, like, I wish people could just understand how irrational we all are, because that's the experience that I got, is just like, oh, wow, I believe all sorts of shit that isn't true. I'm wrong about this. All my decisions are based off emotion, but I know that, so I can take a step back and try to be a better person.
But the fact that they are rational is also one of the reasons why we're in business.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's like I always say, I think that the internet overall is a net negative for humanity, I think. But it's certainly been good to me personally, right? Like, I've made millions of dollars on the internet that I don't think I would have made without it, right? I don't know what I would have done with my life otherwise. So I think it can kind of go both ways. Yeah. I mean, personally, people being irrational is why I'm able to write stories and do things that make money. And it really makes me sad, because you can't have real conversations with people. Emotion takes over everything. And again, like, most people don't even know what a cognitive bias is, right? And don't want to know and don't care, because they're comfortable in that. And like, most people actively push away any information that is counter to what they believe, anything.
No, that's true, man. Like, and some religions do take it to the next level.
Yeah.
I went to religious school in Israel for a couple of years, and I was connected to the Orthodox community. They forbid their members to like get online, to watch TV, to listen to certain radio stations. They're really creating, as much as they can, they'll put you into
a bubble,
like a little hive.
And that's what cults do. Like, and if you're in Scientology, you are banned from looking anything up about David Miscavige being a horrible person and the truth about L. Ron Hubbard and all that kind of stuff. Any cult, if you study cults at all, like, detaching people from outside information is a huge part of it, as well as isolating people from their families and friends. Like, that's a big part of it.